Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop, Virginia. I'm Bettina Lawton, your host. And with me this evening, I have the other host from Inside Scoop, Mark Levine. But he's not here in his capacity as the host of the mothership, so to speak. He is here because he is a candidate in the 8th Congressional District. Most of our viewers know that Congressman Jim Moran has decided to retire at the end of this session, and there is a free-for-all going on in the 8th District, and Mark has thrown his hat into the ring. We actually have him a little early. The official announcement is tomorrow, but it's fine because he's here tonight. So first, for those of you who don't know Mark, and he doesn't go through all of his credentials before he begins his own show, so let me tell you a little bit about Mark, and then we will turn to Mark. Mark has a macroeconomics degree from Harvard College. He studied under Martin Feldstein, who was, of course, President Reagan's chief economist. He went to Yale Law School to get his JD, and I will not hold that against him.
Thank you.
And he was also a Fulbright scholar studying European politics and law in Switzerland. And of course, we know that he is the host of Inside Scoop on television, but he is also the host of a nationally syndicated radio show by the same title. He is frequently a guest with Bill O'Reilly, taking him on. He's been, I think, on the Kelly File. Oh, yeah. He has been on CNN. He has been all over the place, including a turn on Iranian television that was an interesting story. But we are here, Mark.
It is a long story.
It is a long and interesting story. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You are kicking off my series of 8th Congressional District candidate interviews. And so I want to talk to you about what in the world are you doing?
What am I doing?
Yes.
I think the people of the 8th Congressional District want an aggressive progressive. They want someone who's taken on the right-wing propaganda machine for the last 10 years on local, national, international TV and radio the way I have. I also think that I have the longest record of anyone in the race on federal issues, because for the last 10 years on radio and TV, I've had, more than 2,000 radio shows, several hundred television shows. If there's a federal issue before Congress that I haven't dealt with, I'm not sure what it is. Someone will have to let me know. I mean, we've talked about every issue under the sun. But also, and this is the part of my resume you didn't mention, but I know you know it, prior to my career in TV and radio, I worked several years for Congressman Barney Frank. Right. And he was my mentor. And working for Barney Frank, who's truly one of the biggest progressive lights of the day, a lot of things I learned. One, I learned constituent service. I mean, Barney Frank was great at constituent service. He made clear that every single letter was answered, that everyone who wanted to meet with him personally got to meet with him personally at least once. That's something I want to do as well. But also, he made people understand why he supported the things he did. And then, of course, he would go toe-to-toe with Republicans. And I learned under his guidance everything from legislative drafting to how to even work across the aisle. I mean, there are some bills that Barney Frank signed on with Ron Paul. Now, I'd be the first to tell you that Ron Paul, I think, is wacko on a number of issues, but on things like decriminalizing marijuana, for example, ending the drug war, legalizing online gambling and regulating it. There were issues we could move across the aisle, and what Barney Frank taught me is that when Republicans are willing to be reasonable, there's no reason you shouldn't work with them. But when they're not being reasonable, to call them out. And he would call them out so loudly that when he got on the House floor, you could see the Republicans scurry away because they didn't want to deal with him. So I have a history of 13 years. First 3 years under Barney Frank, learning under his training, and then 10 years of calling out Republicans. And here's the heart of the difference, I think. Every one of these candidates running, all of us, good Democrats, virtually all of them will cast a solid blue progressive vote. But I don't think a vote in Congress is enough. You get 1 out of 435. I really hope the Democrats take back the House in 2014, but if we don't, we'll be in the minority. So what do you do when you're in the minority? You just cast a vote and go home? I don't think so. What you do, I think, is you change the debate. You go out there and you argue the way Barney Frank did, the way I've done for 10 years on television and radio, and you aggressively point out the holes in their arguments. That's what I do with Bill O'Reilly all the time. I point out the holes in his arguments, and I think we can actually win over the debate. And here's my example. So 2 years ago, President Obama compromised with the Republicans on the tax bill because they threatened to shut the government down. They threatened to cave on the national debt. And Obama said, don't do that, I'll give you some things. And at that time, I had attacked President Obama, who I largely support, but I thought that was a mistake. And I thought it was a mistake because I think if you give in to those kind of terrorist tactics, they're just going to come back. And what happened, of course, we all know, a few months ago, they shut the government down, right again. But this time, President Obama stood firm. This time he called them out. This time he aggressively said, no, we can come to some agreement, but I'm not going to just give in because you're threatening to shut the government down. And he stood firm. And this time on the national debt, the Republicans quietly caved. So I think that Bill Clinton, even Ronald Reagan showed you can go over the head of the representatives of the American people directly to the American people. That's what you can do on television. That's what you can do on radio. And when the Republicans are being recalcitrant, when they're being ridiculous, when they're not supporting things like a background checks that the vast majority of Americans support because we don't believe that mentally ill people should own guns, or when they're trying to cut Social Security, which is one of the great programs, mainstays, where I would actually expand Social Security. And I think I'm the only candidate so far that has called for that. I hope the other candidates will join me in that.
When you say you would want to expand Social Security, what are you talking about?
Okay, so Social Security is funded, many people know, 94% of Americans pay 6.2% of their income into Social Security. 6% don't. If you're very, very rich, you pay very little. If you make $100,000 a year, you pay 6%. If you make $1 million a year, you pay less than 1%. And if you make $1 billion a year, you pay less than 1,000th of 1%. So millionaires and billionaires don't pay the same percentage of their income as an ordinary middle class or working class American. If we simply made the 6% of Americans who earn over $170,000, if we simply make them pay the same amount that everyone else pays, Social Security has money to last for a century, so much so that we can actually increase benefits for seniors that rely so much on Social Security. We can expand Social Security. Rather than fight the Republicans who are trying to cut it, let's expand it. Let's be aggressively progressive. And that's one of the many things I support.
And do you think that, because right now, you're a commentator, you're a pundit.
That I am.
And so you get invited on to shows like Bill O'Reilly's and these types of things. As a junior, assuming you got elected, you would be one of the very junior people in Congress. Do you think you're still going to have that same opportunity?
I think I am. We'll see. I mean, I can't promise that because it's not my decision. But I've done more than 100 national TV shows, and maybe 200 now, I have to count. And so they know me. I'm a known commodity there. I actually think being a congressman gets me more cachet to go out there and argue national views, even more than I have now, because now I'm not just a pundit, a Democrat. I am a Democratic congressman, and I want to go on Meet the Press, and I want to make that argument for the people of Virginia's 8th, because I think that when the people of Virginia's 8th just have a congressman voting their way, it's not enough. To actually make the argument to change, to give you another example, and I can go on and on policy, but student loans, for example. So it used to be that the government subsidized student loans. The GI Bill, right? They all came home from World War II, they could go right to college. My dad could put himself through college, he paid for about half of college, by working summers and 20 hours a week. You can't do that anymore. Kids are drowning in debt. And one of the reasons they're drowning in debt when they come home from college and have to live with mom and dad is because student loans today, the government takes a piece of it. They make a profit off of it. Used to be the government subsidized and helped people live the American dream. Now they actually grab the American dream away from kids trying to succeed and give that money to wherever agribusinesses and corporate welfare, wherever there's a lot of wasted spending. It's not on kids. We need to help the American dream. We need to bring back the American dream, and we need to reclaim student loans. And other than Elizabeth Warren and me, I'm not sure who's talking about that. So I want to bring up issues, not just the standard progressive issues that I think all the 10 candidates agree with, but actually expand. Talk about expanding the American dream. Don't just protect it, expand it.
So how are you going to get there? Because you're running against folks, the vast majority of the people in the field are already elected to something. So they've already got a constituency within the 8th district in some way, shape, or form, some part of their district. So how do you expand the folks who are coming out? Because basically, I think you would agree, the issue here will be decided on June 10th.
Of course.
So you've got a short...
the winner of June 10th, obviously, is not going to go to sleep. You have to keep working on for the general. But yes, I do strongly suspect the person who wins the primary wins the general election.
So how do you expand that behind the standard Democrats who have gone to the polls before and have pulled that lever for one of your opponents?
Well, I've never been on the ballot before, so they're going to have a choice, a new choice with someone like me. I'm going to raise enough for them to hear my message. And if they want the aggressive progressive, they're going to elect me. If they want someone who's going to go out there and actually change the conversation and talk about not just, for example, on global warming, okay? I would slowly get rid of coal in America. I think coal is dangerous. I think coal is dirty. And that's not something you hear politicians talk about very much.
No, you clearly are running in the 8th Congressional District
I am,
in Virginia.
but I'm also running on my own record. I'm running on things I've talked about for 2,000 radio shows. I've talked about mountaintop bombing, what they're doing in West Virginia, where they're actually using explosives to blow up the mountains, and it rains arsenic and cadmium, selenium, these heavy metals down into our rivers, and that eventually, some of them end up in the Potomac. I mean, these are things I've talked about. I've talked about domestic violence on my shows. I've talked about child abuse. I've talked about women's right to choose. I've done several shows on immigration. I was a citizen activist on issues from marriage equality to domestic violence. God knows I've talked a lot about Bush v. Gore, but because I believe that voting should be protected and we need a new Voting Rights Act. And I've talked about that as well. So people can see my record. They can see what I've talked about. They haven't had a chance to vote for me yet. And that's not to knock any of the other candidates. They've had their chance. They've run in Virginia. This is a federal race. Let's talk about federal issues. Let's talk about what federal issues matter to the people in the 8th Congressional District. And I'm ready to have that debate.
Now, is there anything, as you think back, because you've mentioned all of these different shows and all of these issues,
I've done a lot,
that you are thinking to yourself, oof, I hope nobody digs through the archives on this or that issue? Or have you done the traditional politician, well, I've evolved on that, as so many of them say when they suddenly are changing positions? Anything going to come back and bite you?
I do not envy the person that's going to be assigned to do negative research on me, because they're going to have to search through thousands of radio shows, and some of them are 3 hours long, and hundreds of TV shows, and maybe someone will do that. And Bettina, it might be possible that on August 12, 2006, I said something stupid. It might just have happened. And if that happens, I'm sure someone running a negative campaign will find that 5 seconds and make a soundbite. But I mean, I know me, I know my positions, they haven't changed over 10 years. If I express something inartfully, look at the rest of the clip, I'm sure I made it clear. I may have gotten a fact wrong, but usually if I get a fact wrong, I find out, I correct it on the air. So I'm not real worried. I mean, someone can go and look and find something, but I may have called a Tea Party Republican a not very nice name. I may have done that.
That might have happened.
But other than that, I think I'm okay.
Well, Mark, thanks for coming and kicking this off.
Thanks for having me, Bettina.
Good luck.
Thank you.
You're absolutely right. Whoever has to do the opposition research on you
have a lot of work to do.
Is in for a time, so that's really going to be a whole lot of fun for them. But anyway.
Thank you, Bettina. Thanks for having me on the Inside Scoop.
Thanks for coming.